All right, can everybody please take a seat again? We're about to continue. Okay, let's give it a go. In the back, it would be very great if you could also have a seat or calm a little down so we can start with the next panel. This one is about personal brand and personified marketing. So two trends that have been emerging in marketing over the last couple of years. Personal branding, obviously being the fact of positioning someone in the company, usually the founder, as a renowned expert in their field. Personified marketing rather being investing marketing dollars into building up personalities that then reflect on the brand. And today I'm very happy to have awesome panelists here. Bösch, founder of Outfittery, making online shopping for men more convenient. She's one of the most well-known founders, female founders in Germany, I would say. So a veritable personal brand herself. Next to her, we have Pia Frey from Opinary. She's been voted Forbes 30 under 40, 30, sorry, also under 40. And she's also host of the OMR Media podcast, so she's also a face that you might recognize when you follow the marketing trends out there. We also have Ronnie Vuine here, founder of Micropsi Industries, robotics software company. Ronnie is a studied philosopher and computer scientist. And he successfully positioned himself as a leading authority in the fields of AI and robotics. So happy to have him here as well. And then the panel is hosted by Florian Heinemann, also a personal brand himself, I would say, leading authority in everything marketing and BI. There's no marketing conference or podcast you won't see him participate in. So I think he's the ideal host for this. And then without further ado, welcome everyone and thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Philip, for the nice words. And I don't know whether it's a good thing that I'm on these marketing-related podcasts, but I'll try to fill it with some content. But trying to get into the topic, probably defining it a little bit further, because I think what's important to understand, there's personal branding on the one hand side, and I think we have 3 excellent examples for that. And the other thing that we currently see, or the other trend, is that people that communicate on social-based platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, perform significantly better than companies or products being communicated or being in the center, because they just produce better engagement. So one of our theses is that you need to also in your general communication employ a more personified approach even to your regular marketing and communication. So that will be the second area we're talking about, that you have to separate a little bit from personal branding. Obviously there's interconnections between the two, but it's a separate kind of field that we find highly interesting. But going into the topic, and I think you probably know Julia, you probably also know Pia. Some of you might not know Ronnie, and I think Ronnie is one of the good examples that personal branding also works in the B2B context. It has been an experiment, I guess, to do this. Can you, I mean, we started this personal branding initiative like half a year ago?
Yeah, roughly. 6 or 7 months.
6 or 7 months ago. And does personal branding also work in a B2B context, specifically in robotics and AI?
Yeah.
Do you see any kind of effect on your business, or is it just something that, you know?
Is it just vanity? No, it does work, just in ways we didn't fully anticipate. So we thought about this as a lead generation tool, which frankly it wasn't that much in these first 6 months. That's also not a long time if you're experimenting. What it worked in was help build a reputation as a serious player in a very conservative field that we're entering. So, right, we're a Berlin-based, venture-backed startup that goes into a very traditional, very conservative, and very engineering field. So people don't necessarily trust you, and especially if you're doing fancy things like AI. So right, there's just a natural distrust with potential customers. So are these guys serious? We don't have what, I only know the German, Steigeruch. So you're supposed to have it and we don't. And then just by being on the web, saying things that sound like they could come from an engineer, you sort of build a reputation of, okay, these people actually speak our language. And they actually explain how what they're doing is not a fancy thing and is not driven by the media hype, but is valuable. So for us, personal branding mostly worked when people started Googling us and Googling me and found my stuff on YouTube and said, oh, okay, that actually sounds sensible.
So also the German Mittelstand
yes.
Googles Ronnie and finds you on YouTube and sees, okay, that guy is actually serious.
Yes, so my favorite moment was when a proper German Maschinenbauer from Westfalen called me and said, your videos on YouTube where you explain all this is brilliant. And this comes from a guy who was super skeptical when I first met him. Mm-hmm. So he actually came to Berlin, saw me, and then after he went home, apparently the visit got him thinking, okay, maybe these guys are real after all. And he started Googling and found the explanations that I'd done. I said, okay, now I like this.
Okay. That sounds super symptomatic to what we experience with personal branding, which is in B2B context. You sell from business to business, but in the end you sell from a person to person. Yeah. And
yeah, absolutely, exactly.
And you want this trust.
Yeah, so the numbers aren't really high, right? So if you look at the YouTube channel, there's like a couple hundred views. This isn't, you don't become a star, but the people who do Google you find something that's relevant, and it makes perfect sense in a B2B context.
And what you've done, just to explain that, you've been mainly present on YouTube and on LinkedIn, linking to this. So no Instagram, no TikTok, no Snapchat. For the German Mittelstand.
We did Instagram, and it worked weirdly well in Indonesia.
Okay. So Indonesian Mittelstand companies looking at
Indonesian people who want to learn about AI and make a career out of it, and trying to learn something there.
Okay.
So we keep doing it because it's really cheap compared to everything else. So we just cross-post the content there and just let it happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's stay in the B2B arena for a little bit. Switch to Pia. Pia, you are hosting a podcast. Is that something that you would recommend? You've been doing it now for a year or so?
I think a bit more than a year. And I would recommend it because it's quite fun. I'm interviewing media people from the media industry in a bi-weekly cycle. But I think what's true to this, as well as to any other branding strategies, it's only right as long as you feel it's fun to you and you feel good about it. Yeah. And it wasn't, or the podcast didn't come into place in the way that we were thinking, how can we build a more thought leadership oriented branding channel or marketing or sales channel, but more in the way of, would be fun to make a podcast. Yeah, and it could be also valuable in some ways. And I think that's also symptomatic to many branding strategies where I think the plan comes second and just the personal drive and interest comes first. Mm-hmm. And then you can see what comes out of it. And to us, the way it's valuable to us is in terms of credibility in our client base, awareness for us as a player in the field, mm-hmm. and secondary also as a sales channel to people that don't want to take a meeting with me otherwise. Mm-hmm.
So you see a definitive impact on your operational business from what you do. I mean, that's people know you from the podcast, or you've known people before, and now you integrate them into the podcast to make them like a more tight partner.
So we definitely do think that, and I also want to believe that because it's just, I love doing it, but it's quite hard to measure. Mm-hmm. And you can do like a sponsored campaign in our own podcast, offering campaigns for a special price or whatever, but in the end it's hard to measure. And measurement comes from how much we like it, how much awareness we see it gets in our client base, but that's in a quite non-calculative or measurable way.
Okay. You did one interesting thing, and I think that's also very interesting for the audience. You decided to go on an existing channel, OMR, and you have like a sub-channel on Online Marketing Rockstars. The other option would have been you do the Opinary podcast.
Yeah.
Would you do that again, going on the OMR channel, or would you rather do a dedicated Opinary channel, completely independent?
So to us it was definitely the right way to do it on the OMR channel, for the awareness and the reach OMR has for themselves, and secondly, it's not super trivial to produce a podcast. And building on the infrastructure that is there, building on the audience and on the brand that is there already, and using their distribution power helped us a lot. And I think I would not have done it on our own channel.
So listen, if you want to do your own podcast, 26 episodes per year, that's quite a lot, and that's the minimum you need to do, I would say. I don't know whether you would agree.
What is, like, fun fact about this podcast, I managed to get quite some prominent and interesting guests on this podcast, from the US and from Germany, like editors-in-chief of Business Insider, from BuzzFeed, Kai Diekmann, etc. The one episode that had the highest sharing rates and retention rates and one of the highest download numbers was an episode that I did with my mom.
Okay, that's cool. That's also important, yeah, to keep the family alive. It's good. Switching to Julia, real quick. You are obviously more in a B2C business, attracting men to become dressed in a better way. I'm core target group, so that's good. But I mean, you've always, like from the very beginning, you started to be quite active, also with your co-founder Anna, to be present in the press, marketing yourselves also as female founders, whether intentionally or not. What would you say in hindsight? Has it helped you to get more customers? I mean, has it helped you on the customer acquisition side, or was it more like an internal kind of getting better employees, or what has been the main benefit of like your prominence in a certain way?
Yeah. So generally in Outfittery, as we offer a personal styling service, personifying the brand is core to what we do. So in our service, we also put the stylist front and center. The customer gets a handwritten love letter from his stylist. We communicate in CRM through the stylist. So putting kind of human faces in front is very natural to us. And therefore also my co-founder Anna and I, we put our faces to the front. So I would say in the very beginning, we were nervous to do that, and it didn't come natural to me. So I didn't go into the spotlight to get the spotlight, but we actually realized pretty early on that the story we had to tell, which was the founding story of two female founders, was actually interesting to people. So a lot of people told our story, and today 75% of German men know Outfittery, and a big part of that is also the press coverage, because through that story, people were interested in Outfittery, tested the service, talked about it. So it did help us quite a lot to build up the brand, but also for employer branding to attract great talent.
Yeah. But what you're not engaging in, at least if I follow it correctly, you know, there's some founders, I don't want to talk about who are doing a lot of Instagram and sharing a lot of personal stuff, and you don't do that, which you could, if I follow your logic from the beginning, you could also do that and show who you're going out with. And
yeah, so I thought about kind of what are the stories that I'm willing to tell and share, and what are the areas that I want to position myself in. So for me, it's on the one hand side, retail of the future, and kind of how does fashion shopping look like in the future, and there I'm sharing all the insights that we have from developing Outfittery. And the other topic I'm passionate about is kind of female leadership, entrepreneurship, and obviously I have a very personal story to tell there. But I don't go beyond that because it's just not authentic to me, and I think that's very important. The only way a personal brand can work is if you're authentic and you don't try to play a role that you came up with.
But I think that's a key learning also to others, because you can be a personal brand, which you definitely are, if you position yourself in serious topics and you don't have to like open up everything. And I think that's a key learning, that you can say, okay, female entrepreneurship, that's an important topic to me, female leadership is important, and like, you know, what I do at Outfittery is important, and that's where I'm very open and communicate, but I don't need to show, I don't know, my boyfriend on Instagram. That's not necessary to become a personal brand, and I think that's a good thing. Ronnie, coming back to you, what do you see as your, I mean, you're currently working on YouTube, you're currently working on LinkedIn. Obviously, there were conscious choices.
Yeah.
What would you say, like, what are the best channels for B2B? Is that it? Is that enough? Do you have to be present also on Twitter, on, I don't know, on Zing? You can also do stuff. What's your take right now?
We don't have a ton of data yet, also just because we started with our best hypothesis, and it's only been 6 months. LinkedIn works well for people who are there, they're really interested, but German Mittelstand isn't really.
German Mittelstand is predominantly still on Zing. That's also a very interesting lesson. So even if people say Zing is dead, that's, even if also if you look at the stock price, Zing is not dead and has a lot of reach, especially if you want to reach B2B companies in the DACH region.
It's really, you feel like you're sort of in a Berlin startup-y bubble on LinkedIn, where you have people who think about marketing, people thinking about metal machines are usually really on Zing in Germany. And weirdly, we haven't tested this ourselves, but I hear stories about companies in our field doing really well on Facebook, of all things. So yeah, these were conscious choices. We should have done Zing earlier, I believe. Twitter is weird. We're sort of cross-posting what we do on Twitter, and it doesn't really work. And I think the reason is we're cross-posting stuff on Twitter. On Twitter, you need to be really authentic, and being really authentic on Twitter in these days means you need to engage in controversial things where you either play to the stupidity that's going on there, or you're trying to be the voice of reason, and being the voice of reason on complex matters is hard. It just takes time. I just can't do it. So Twitter, you need to be really serious if you want to do it, I believe.
So talking about time, how much of your time right now do you dedicate to what we're just talking about? Have you ever done an analysis? You are a quantitative person, so you definitely have.
I haven't done an analysis, but I mean, there's like a deal between me and the personal branding people who work on this with me, that we keep this to something that's manageable, because there's also a company to run. And the way, I mean, this video content that we're doing is really easy to produce for me, right? This is things I talk about with my clients all the time. So they just bring a camera, put me in front of it, and let me talk for a day, and then they cut it. So the effort that I need to put in for this content isn't that high. That's like, I don't know, two days a month, if even. So that's not really that bad. There's some written content which is a bit more expensive, but there's also great support now from a team that does that. And then anything where you engage with your audience, that gets really expensive. Because if you engage in a relevant manner, I do AI. Everybody's running around with their hair on fire and saying, China is much better at this. I think that's nonsense. But if I make that statement publicly, I'd like to have my stuff together and reason the case. And that's easily 2 days gone when you sit down and write that long LinkedIn post where you say, okay guys, this is more complicated, and don't be fooled by just the trend of saying this, which comes from interested parties, et cetera, et cetera. So I find myself half writing these posts on the weekend and then never posting them, because I don't feel I'm adding anything if I do this half-baked thing now.
Okay. And that's the thing, and that's I think also an important learning. I think if you do podcasts or if you do video, or that's much easier. That's what a lot of people actually say than doing written stuff, because written stuff, you know, every sentence has to be right. And I think the great thing about podcasts and also video is, that's at least my experience myself, if it's 80% or 90%, it's also okay. And the rest, like the remaining 10, 20% are so expensive in terms of time. So don't write so much. It's much easier to do podcasts and
Yeah, and we tried transcribing, and then all of a sudden you read your own transcript and you sound like Donald Trump. Just don't do written content.
Yeah. So it also doesn't fit in the time so well. Yeah. But for a former journalist, don't do written content. Would you agree to that? I mean, do you still write stuff on Medium?
I do still write, but not very often, because what you say is true. And as a ex or still journalist, my standards to make it proper and good are very, very high, and that just takes an awful lot of time.
Mm-hmm. But you said something that's very interesting. You have help. I mean, even though if you want to communicate authentically, you don't have to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the setup that you have to help you with the podcast and with the content you produce? Is there anybody from Opinary helping you? How many people? How do you orchestrate this?
So we're not originally. First, it's just everything that we put out, marketing and personal branding wise, even with people on the team, just came from them directly. Mm-hmm. We now just start building a little infrastructure around it, and give responsibilities to people to help in some of this infrastructure and setup, because we see that it has quite an impact. What I've thought about LinkedIn, when you talked about LinkedIn, and when you talked about authenticity and feeling awkward or good about something, I feel like LinkedIn is quite an important channel on many levels, but my personal awkwardness factor is very, very high on LinkedIn, because there are so many people who claim to be thought leader and keynote speaker on everything on there. And it's just an environment where everyone seems to strive to be super, super knowledgeable. And that is exhausting as an environment.
It is, but you also get away with doing this at all. You sort of get away with doing this at all on LinkedIn, because everybody does it. There's an excuse for being slightly non-authentic, and everybody sort of is on LinkedIn.
And what I've realized, if on LinkedIn, where everybody kind of really has a put together positioning, so to say, if you there share really authentic content or pictures that you just took on the team meeting, it has a big effect.
That's
because it's actually more personal than people would expect to see on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. Julia, one thing that I want to get into a little bit is at Outfittery.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, you have all these stylists, great looking, really stylish.
Experts on fashion.
Experts on the fashion, that's great. So, but you haven't been using them so much, at least for customer acquisition. And if you believe in personified communication we said earlier, is that a conscious decision? I mean, I have my personal stylist, which by the name also is called Julia, which is great. And she writes me letters, and I really like that. And I sometimes buy. But that's more the CRM communication. But you haven't been using your stylist a lot for authentic communication, personified communication on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. Is that going to change, with the trends that you see?
So we're in the process of changing that, and also placing our stylists more and telling their stories on our Instagram and all of our channels, because we see that this has quite a big effect for sure. The one factor is that we kind of only once you join Outfittery, we match you with the best stylist on the platform. So therefore, once you've joined in the CRM communication, we really kind of position the stylist a lot, but we also want to do that in the beginning now, because I think there's a lot of very interesting stories to tell. We even started to position also stylists in PR, because people are interested in their expertise, but also just their personal stories.
And I think that's a very interesting learning, that the personified communication does not necessarily have to rely only on the founder. Yeah. And I think every startup should think who could be authentic ambassadors also from within the organization. You also have, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, but there's somebody at Opinary also communicating quite actively on LinkedIn, and I think it's,
Valerie Kremer.
exactly, Valerie. She's also, I think, very good at this, and I think that's also something one could encourage employees to do. I mean, obviously you're in a great position, yeah. I mean, having great-looking girls with great-looking stuff is obviously cool to put it on Instagram and on Facebook, and it's not that easy to do that with everybody in the organization. I guess at your organization it's a little bit more difficult to find people to do that, but I think it's an interesting thought.
That's a very interesting thought, and you need to find somebody whose story is interesting, plus who's passionate about sharing it.
Yeah.
So you need to have that character of having fun while sharing it. And we have some of these guys, and we start sharing way more on that.
Yeah. Has anybody of you experience because one thing is you put it out there and then you hope it gets organic reach, right? I mean, that's one thing. And what we see as a very interesting field right now is, you know, the interaction between you start to share something organically, and then it has a certain level of engagement, and then you put it into a sponsored post, and you can do that on LinkedIn, you can do that on Facebook, you can do that on Instagram, no matter what. Does anybody of you work with this to spread basically the content that you do also in a paid way?
We do that with influencer marketing.
Okay.
So influencers who try the service, we then also promote that over the different platforms.
Yeah.
And that works very well for us.
And I think that's also a very interesting thought for everybody who's not using it, especially on things like Facebook, because a lot of people say Facebook is dead. In a certain way, it is dead when it comes to organic, but the interesting thing really is putting things out organically, and then things that show a certain traction, putting paid campaigns on top of it, and that can still be a lot cheaper than, you know, regular type of campaigns. And I think that's a very interesting field that has not been explored. One thing that I want to get into a little bit is the measurement. You already described it's not that easy, but you're still putting a lot of your time and effort into it. Will you try to quantify it somehow in a certain way, or will you just say, no, I believe for us it's important to be a thought leader, we position ourselves this way, we see that it works, and it's just like a branding investment that you need to take? What's your view on this?
One channel that we measure quite a lot is the social selling aspect of it. Mm-hmm. When we measure where do we get or how do we get meetings with our relevant stakeholders in our partner or aspiring partner base, there we can see that the people from our team, from the sales teams, who approach people on social and start by liking their stuff, start commenting, and then at some point when you're at the same conference or whatever, sending a message and then getting together to a meeting, which then results in a pitch. Mm-hmm. That is one of our most successful sales channels in our client base with publishers and with brands. Mm-hmm. And there we can see that it definitely outperforms many other ways, from cold emailing to phone calls, etc.
And so you put it exactly to the same KPIs or measure it by the same KPIs as you would do any kind of lead gen campaign.
Yeah.
So that's kind of similar.
And it's very tailored, and of course it's not like it is not endlessly scalable, mm-hmm. but highly effective in the kind of relationship and the retention that is being built with the clients that are being approached. Mm-hmm.
Julia, have you ever tried to quantify what you're doing?
Yes.
I mean, how much is a Handelsblatt article worth?
So we've tried this on PR a lot. It's impossible.
Okay.
So you can count the articles, you can make different categories, how many articles in A, B, and C media. In the end, you either commit to it or you don't. I think it's a more qualified approach.
Yeah. And that coming from Julia, she's a really quantitative person. So,
yeah, it's tough for me, but at some point I came to the conclusion that's the only way to do it, yeah.
Yeah. I have to admit, I'm probably come to the same conclusion. I'm also went down this ABC articles, and where we mentioned positive and negative, and then you try to, and then you get the reach that's wrong.
Maybe
anyway.
You can work on some correlation model, but for us it was impossible.
Yeah. It's at least very hard. And then the question is, if it is more expensive to quantify the stuff than the benefit you're getting out of it, then you're probably at a point where it doesn't make a lot of sense.
There's one company from the US, they sell analytics tools to publishers. And they also were wondering how can we measure this huge effort that they are doing in their content marketing and in their overall branding strategy. And the way they then just measured it was they stopped everything for a month and didn't put out anything anymore. And there is a very good article that describes the effects of it, and there were measurable effects to not communicating anymore. And I can recommend this article on parsley.com. I don't remember the exact measurements.
One other aspect, I mean, we do this event here today, which is can also be used as a personal or personified branding kind of effort. Is that something that you would also see in a B2B context, or that you would potentially do? So the micropsi robotics summit or something, to position yourself as a thought leader, generate content. Is that something you would consider?
Yeah, in a very tailored fashion to people we are talking to anyway. Right? The community we're selling to is essentially so small, and they talk amongst themselves anyway, that just doing an event without directly telling people do please come wouldn't make much sense. So for us, we're going to do this. It's probably going to be more of a roadshow thing where we take a demo around and invite all the locals who need to put up robots to play with the system and experience it. I think that's probably the way to go for us. Just a big untargeted event, just to attract random people. We know all the names anyway.
Yeah, I'm just coming to that thought, and that might be interesting also for you. If you look at what About You is doing right now, my feeling is why they are doing so many events. A lot of the reason is they do events to create authentic content and then push it out. Because I don't know whether you have thought about it, but I think it's not that easy to find a scalable way to do this personified way of communication and doing events, recording the content that's happening and spreading it. That to me seems to be at least like one scalable approach. And I don't know whether you've seen what ProSieben is doing with About You, with his influencer awards, and then About You has bought several festivals that they're running, and then they're producing shitloads of contents around the festival, and then they're using the content all year round.
How is it for you here? How is it for you here?
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think for us, it's the best way. I mean, we could also just to give you also a picture there, I mean, if you want to do a sponsorship at a NOAA conference or whatever, that will cost you 80,000 euro as a VC. Or a web summit, not below 100,000 euros. And for that, you're sitting on one panel, and you probably host a dinner that will cost you another 6,000 euros. No, so for us, it's definitely one alternative where we say we can authentically show who we are, and whether people like it or not, they can decide themselves. I mean, you can come, you can go. That's like it's a free world, and for us, it's a great way. And I think we also do podcasts here. We do videos. So I'm a big believer in this, also in a B2B context, and I would encourage any founder to think how they can employ this for themselves. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that Zalando did over the last 2-3 years was cutting down the bread and butter. I think it could have been a very interesting, I mean, I don't know who followed that, but Zalando bought the bread and butter, I think 5 years ago, and they shut it down 2 years ago. And I think I don't understand how you can actually do that. Yeah, that's beyond my comprehension. How you can take something like that, you get it for free, and you don't do anything with it. I mean, they basically got it for free. And at the other hand, you see About You doing what they do. Yeah? So I think it's definitely something. Also, if you look at China, I don't know whether you guys follow what's happening in China in e-com. It's all event-based. It's event-based, like home shopping on steroids, event-based. That's what they do. And I know, obviously, we're culturally different than the Chinese, but thinking about what can work in our context, combining events with creating content and pushing it out, I think it's definitely something, I mean, we are obviously thinking about. And I think as a real company, I mean, we're not a real company per se. I mean, yes, we have customers, but I think it's 100% spot on for B2B and B2C companies. I'm very much convinced that is actually more authentic. Julia, can you talk a little bit about, and I think that's also interesting to the audience, I mean, you are running a great influencer program already, and if we are right with our hypothesis, that can actually be in a similar way also empower personified communication for founders or for other people. How does a department look like? I mean, how do you deal with your influencers? How many people do this? What kind of roles you have there? How do you do that?
So we have a performance marketing team and then a communications team. And the communications team handles all the PR relationships. So I say relationships because it's really about building relationships and connecting to journalists over time. It's not just kind of pushing out your press release once and then you're done. You need to build up these relationships and foster those relationships over time. And the same is true for influencers. So also there, we're not looking to just have somebody talk about Outfittery once, but build out a long-term partnership and have them as real brand ambassadors for Outfittery.
So you kind of have account managers dealing with influencers.
Yeah, exactly.
And how many influencers do you deal with normally? I mean, do you have like a roster of 30 or do you have 2,000 to like micro-influencer? What's your approach there?
So we're more focused, but to be honest, we're not yet where we want to be. So we're still in the phase of building this up further. So yeah, anybody who wants to become an influencer for Outfittery, please reach out.
Yeah, okay. So julia@outfittery.de.
Exactly.
Yeah? That's the email address. Ronnie, you are not working with influencers yet. Are there no influencers in the field of robotics and AI, and why?
No, there most definitely are.
Okay.
They're not very, I don't think they're very digital and online, but you know, there's like 20 key people in this industry in Germany whose judgment really matters. And you need to convince them, and if they start talking badly about you, you're in trouble. So, influencers are older than social media.
Yeah.
I don't think we can reach them there, or we can use them. It doesn't work that way, but the structure is definitely there.
Yeah. But is that something that, I mean, you still reach out to these people?
Yeah.
You still try to communicate with these people?
Yeah.
So you try to kind of engage in a community also with them in a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, this is just travel diplomacy, right? So even if you don't have something to sell through them or to do with them, you just go there, show up, pay your respects, say, I'm now playing in your field. This is what I can do. I sort of want your endorsement.
Yeah.
Do you want to try it out? And then we give free samples of the product if people are interested. And then we manage these relationships closely. We call them, does it work? Just to make sure they get it and they have fun doing it, which is still important. These are very serious people, and they would never admit that having fun while doing their work matters, but of course it does.
Yeah.
So we do that, but we need to do it personally.
Okay. Here, I wanted to pick up one thought from Julia and pass it on to you. And I thought what I found was really interesting, how PR also works, and also from your perspective as a journalist, because I think one interesting thing that you talked about, even you don't just go out to journalists and say, this is my story, now write about it, fucker, no? But you actually have a certain type of relationship. From a journalist perspective, I mean, how does a communication from a journalist perspective work, from your perspective, in a way that, how often do you need to talk to somebody like Julia and don't write about it, just get casual conversation? I mean, how can you, what's the relationship there? Is it basically that you need to be in touch on a regular basis and then every half a year you write something about it? Or how do you, what's like the most healthy relationship if you have, because there's always like 10, 15 journalists that are really relevant to you. Would you recommend to founders they should have a constant relationship and communication stream with them? Or is that too much?
It's a very good question, and my journalist days are a bit long gone, but I remember how many emails and outreach you receive from people who want to just have a coffee and talk about their interesting business idea, and you say no. And so I think this relationship building is exactly the right or is the right ambition and the right intuition to do. But I think as soon as, from a journalist perspective, it feels like somebody wants to build a relationship with me, you resist. And even for journalist standards, you resist, because you don't want to get your blurred view on some things by being invited to 12 coffees. And so I think it rather needs to go the back way, and it much rather has to happen in the way that there are two people who happen to be interested in the same topics and connect either on social, on Twitter, or in their social bubble, and then it happens to be a founder who wants to bring across their message and a journalist.
And I think that's a key learning, and also for the audience. I think if you want to get people interested, journalists or whoever, it's always the most natural ways via a common topic, and you have to stand for a topic. So I think a key thing in personal branding is really, like you defined Outfittery is my topic, and female leadership and entrepreneurship, that's my topics, and that's what I stand for, and that's why I have something interesting to say, and then people will come to you and will want to have a relationship. And I think that's a key learning that a lot of founders don't really fulfill. I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
And I think in terms of, in order to build that relationship, what's important is that you don't only deliver kind of the messages, but you actually give people an interesting insight into what's happening, kind of what are my thoughts, what is happening inside the company, what are the things that have worked, what has not worked. So that's the way, I guess, to build a relationship. So the journalist doesn't have the feeling, I just want him to print my press release, but there's actually some interesting behind the scenes information that, as you say, makes two people come together and just discuss something that both are interested in.
Yeah, and I think you will notice that yourself, 3 minutes, you will notice that yourself, the best personal branding initiatives or people that do personal branding the best always have really thought carefully about what are the messages that they want to get out, and share those in a probably not obviously commercial way. And I think that is a key learning. We have 3 minutes. I want to open up the floor if that's possible or interesting. We have these 3 great entrepreneurs. Chance to ask a question. There's a question from over there. Do we have any microphone? Oh yeah, there's a microphone. Philip is moving as fast as he can. No, he's not.
Yeah, I was just keen to hear a bit more about the kind of teams and infrastructure that you guys have set up to kind of boost these efforts, and how much is still the CEO, the co-founder doing stuff and coming up with stuff themselves.
I'm happy to start. So as I said, we have a communications team. Mark, help me, 5 people? Yeah, okay. They do a lot of kind of the thinking behind it, but obviously when it's about talking to journalists, there is still a lot of time commitment also from my side. So that's the setup.
Yeah, but 5 people. But I would say a minimum of 1 or 2 people helping you to organize the stuff and also getting the key messages really right. And some people are very intuitive in doing it. For example, my co-founder Uwe, he's just a gift in being a very good guy in getting the message straight. I need some help, yeah, so to be really on point, but I think that what really depends on. You have a call? No, oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, Philip?
Thanks, hi. Can you recommend any external people who are helpful in the process of supporting you building a personal brand?
I can, but they're probably Pia Frey portfolio exclusive, right?
Yeah, we helped him a little bit. But are we aware of any external agency helping you? It's probably more. Do you know anybody?
Yeah, I mean, we have worked with PR agencies, and they did have interesting thoughts. In the end, I think it's a work that you need to do yourself as a company. So, but you can definitely get input and ideas from a PR agency.
Yeah, I mean, there are individual consultants. For one guy that, for example, Alexander Graf works with, his name is Elias Wiedes. So, and there's a lot of video guys, you know, that are around helping you to shoot good videos, because I think that's something. But I don't really like traditional PR agencies. That's at least our experience. Are not really 100% suitable for this?
Yeah, very much depend. So there are 2 individuals that I could point out to if you're interested. Yeah.
I think what does help from an advisory perspective a lot is just asking people that you trust from like your client base or industry or friend base, is it awkward what I just put out there or is it okay? And just asking for feedback for things that you publish.
Yeah. Who's also a good guy in personal branding is definitely Christopher Magnussen. I don't know whether you've seen him, Black Boat. I mean, he's doing a great job, I think. He's doing this podcast on the way to Newark. I think they also consult people, but I think in the B2B sector, that's really top-notch standard.
Yeah, because that's actually another recommendation that I would give. Just reach out to people who you think have built a great personal brand and ask them how they've done it and what the thinking was.
Yeah, like somebody like Alexander Graf or this Christopher Magnussen guy. I mean, there's several people around. I think Signavio is also doing a good job in this. So I would just look at companies who are doing it in a good way and then try to find out. But it's not like the big PR agency often behind it. It's more individual people that get it. And often these people are surprisingly young. That's also something that I find amazing. One more question? Yeah? Any more? One question? No? Yeah? Final question for the day.
Hey, I'm Patrick. Julia, a question to you. With the merge with Modomoto, is there any change in your communication in your personal brand?
The change is that I talk a lot about our learnings from the merger recently. So that is the big change, because obviously this is the interesting story now and the big learning for us as a company, and I do share that a lot. Yeah.
So she's become a thought leader on M&A. Yeah, goes fast these days. Yeah.
All right.
Follow-up question?
2 or 3 learnings from the merger.
Oh, there are so many. We can chat about this afterwards.
Yeah. All right, then thanks to the 4 of you. Unfortunately, we have to cut it here due to time constraints. We could go on forever, I think. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Danke, Florian.